Welcome back guys. In this video I'll be trying out LSFG 2.1 X3 frame generation mode on my Windows PC that has a Ryzen 5700X 3D processor and an RTX 2070 Super GPU. I'm recording this video using my mobile phone. The thing is, softwares like Nvidia Shadowplay and OBS are not able to capture the effect of LSFG. LSFG is a universal frame generator built using machine learning that works on any GPU, whether it's from Intel, Nvidia or AMD. It does not matter. It's included with an application called Lossless Scaling, which sells on Steam Store for around $7. Just a few days ago, it received a major update in the form of version 2.1. It introduced X3 frame generation mode, which effectively triples the frame rate. Yes, you heard it right. This is achieved by generating 2 intermediate frames. X3 mode has increased GPU load by approximately 1.7 times compared to X2 mode. At the same time, LSFG 2.1 performance mode and LSFG 1.1 have been optimized to be 20% faster in X2 mode compared to the previous version. X2 mode basically doubles the FPS and is less demanding on the GPU than the X3 mode. Here's the interesting part. It has been tested that X3 mode does not cause any additional latency compared to X2 mode. Latency is affected by the base frame rate and when the GPU is fully utilized, so it's recommended to have some GPU headroom before enabling LSFG's X3 frame generation mode. For the best experience in both image smoothness and latency, it is recommended to lock the game's frame rate at 1/3 of the monitor's refresh rate in X3 mode. For example, if your monitor supports up to 240Hz, just cap the in-game FPS to 80. I'll be doing it using RTSS. My display does support 240Hz refresh rate. The minimum recommended base frame rate remains the same as for X2 mode at 30 FPS for Full HD resolution and 40 FPS for 1440p resolution. Lossless scaling frame rate will never exceed the display's refresh rate now. I have already demonstrated X3 frame generation mode on my ROG Ally. Its display supports up to 120Hz refresh rate, so I had capped the in-game FPS to 40. The performance gains were really amazing. LSFG tried to triple the FPS, increase the FPS to around 120. However, I did observe some graphical artifacts in a few games. These artifacts were present around the character model. Also observed some garbled textures around the left and right edges of the display. Unlike FSR3 frame generation, LSFG does not rely on game data like motion vectors. So even when the games are running at a higher FPS, there will be some graphical artifacts. On my PC, I'll try to achieve a base frame rate of around 80. After enabling LSFG, FPS will drop down to around 60. LSFG should still produce good results. FPS getting tripled to around 180. Games not having a lot of graphical artifacts. Input delay should not be an issue when the base frame rate is around 60. If your display supports up to 60Hz refresh rate only, I would not recommend using X3 frame generation mode. Better to use LSFG X2 frame generation mode. It will try to double the FPS from 30 to 60, but there will be some noticeable graphical artifacts. I'll cap the FPS to 80 using RTSS. First I'll be running Cyberpunk 2077. You need to have lossless scaling application running in the background. Just launch it. Show you the settings. Just select LSFG 2.1 from this drop down bar under frame generation. If you want to select any older version of lossless scaling, you can select it from here. Not using its performance mode, it's for weaker GPUs. Clip cursor setting enabled, draw FPS setting enabled. It will show us the FPS count with frame generation. Capture API, DXGI. That's it. I have disabled VRR. Not using any of LSFG's upscaling algorithms. Settings. Start as administrator setting enabled. Hotkey for enabling LSFG. Control Alt and S. That's it. I have VSync enabled from Nvidia control panel. Won't be using VSync from in-game settings. Using Afterburner overlay to show you the performance metrics, its frame pacing graph is not able to represent frame generation accurately. When I enable LSFG, frame pacing graph just shows it as stutters. I am using the high settings, DLSS enabled, using its quality presets. You need to make sure that the games are running in borderless display mode like this, Full HD resolution. In-game VSync disabled. We are in. I am standing right outside V's apartment building. FPS here is around 80. GPU load is around 65 to 68%. It's the perfect scenario for enabling LSFG. Just enable it now. Press Ctrl Alt and S keys together. You can see LSFG's FPS counter in the top left corner. Base frame rate 80. on the left side, and on the right side we have the FPS with frame generation enabled 240. Resume the game. Okay, base frame rate dropped down to around 65. GPU load increased around 92%. I am observing some graphical artifacts around the crosshair. When I move it around quickly, it flickers. Can observe the added amount of smoothness. Here FPS with frame generation is around 190. Game's HUD elements are not flickering, so very smooth experience. Latency is not an issue. Let me just use the gamepad, give you an idea about the input response. Wow, the camera is floating. Nothing by pressing the B key. Okay, I'll just cap the FPS to 20 now, give you an idea about the artifacts. LSFG will try to triple the FPS, increase it to around 60. Let's see what happens. Enable LSFG. Yeah, our gun is flickering. I can observe some garbled textures around it. So you want the base frame rate to be as high as possible. It's as simple as that. I'm also observing some garbled textures around the left edge of the display. Input delay increased. Very difficult to aim using a mouse. Let's go back to 80 FPS. Drive around the city. Kill the cops. Steal the vehicle. Switch my camera, much better. Using FSR3 frame generation in this game, some artifacts are produced around the bumper of the car. No such artifacts observed when using LSFG. Performance gains are really amazing. Our base FPS always stayed above 60. It has a big role to play when it comes to reducing the graphical artifacts and latency. Now I'll be testing the next game. Now I'll be running a very popular title, Baldur's Gate 3. This game is very demanding on the CPU and I have the right CPU for the task, 5700X 3D. Running the DirectX 11 version. Game settings, borderless display mode, Full HD resolution, in-game VSync disabled, DLSS enable, quality preset. Just using the medium settings. Don't want the game to hit the GPU bottleneck. And that's it. Straight away load the third act, lower city area. Game is played from a top-down view when using mouse and keyboard. So I'll be playing the game using my gamepad. It will be played from a third-person perspective. It will make it easier for us to observe the performance gains. There is my character, Karlak. My team right behind me. Here we are getting 80 FPS. GPU load is around 50%. That's good to see. Check out the input response. Camera sensitivity is on the higher side. I'll just enable LSFG now. Press its hotkey. Controller screen switch to mouse and keyboard. Here you can see the FPS count in the corner. Okay, not observing a big gain in performance with LSFG enabled, but it's definitely there. The camera animation is slightly smoother now. Not observing any graphical artifacts. Game's HUD is not flickering. FPS with frame generation is around 220. It's definitely not true. still better than the base FPS of around 80. Play the game. I'll enter the tavern. The blushing mermaid. Base FPS is around 70. Now I'll be testing the next game. A very demanding title, Dragon's Dogma Part 2. My PC struggles to maintain a steady 60 FPS in this game. I'm expecting some graphical artifacts. Game is very demanding in crowded areas where there are a lot of non-playable characters. Hammers the CPU. Game settings. Display mode set to borderless. Full HD resolution. DLSS enabled using its quality preset. Basically using the low settings. Disable the effects. Game is very demanding on the GPU as well. Shadow cache enable helps in improving the performance. Texture quality set to low. That's it. Yeah, this is the game running without LSFG. I am at Vermont Outpost. Lot of non-playable characters around me. FPS is around 60. And this pawn wants to join our team. I'll hire him. Just sprint around. $60 to 80 FPS. I'll just enable LSFG. GPU load is already around 90%. See what happens. Okay, so base FPS dropped down to around 50. FPS with frame generation enabled is around 150. Yeah, I can observe the added amount of smoothness. Minor graphical artifacts. Character model's head is flickering, as you can see. LSFG definitely helps in improving the performance in this game. Just leave the place. Not this way. There's the way. Skip the dialogues. This guy wants our help. Just show you some combat. Yeah, game is running very smoothly. See the camera animation. Goblins. Give my pawn some commands. Just attack these creatures. Game is definitely playable using LSFG. I'll be testing the next game. Now I'll be running Resident Evil 4. Graphics setting, I'm using the balance preset, Full HD resolution, display mode set to borderless, cinematic set to Full HD, high texture setting, motion blur disabled, and that's it. There's Leon. Here we are getting around 80 FPS. GPU load is around 75%. Perfect scenario for enabling LSFG. I'll be fighting against hordes of villagers. Crazy villagers right in front of me. Village square. Very smooth experience. Real 80 FPS. LSFG enabled. You can see its FPS counter. Yeah, base FPS dropped down to around 60. Can observe the added amount of smoothness. Not observing. Wait a minute. I'm actually observing some minor graphical artifacts around Leon's character model. Slight ghosting. Not easy to observe. Controls are very responsive while engaged in combat. FPS with frame generation around 180. Input delay is not an issue. Game is running like a dream. Oh my god, that guy jumped on me. It was this woman. Missed the shot. Got points. Get away from me. Just running around. They burned the cop alive. Good experience even in Resident Evil 4, but I'll be honest, 160 FPS with frame generation is not as good as the real 160 FPS. Still, it's better than the real 80 FPS. Block the attack using my knife. I was ready for that. Too many of these things. Now I'll be testing the next game, Ghost of Tsushima. This game does support FSR frame generation, so I'll just disable it. DLSS upscaler enable using its quality preset, full HD resolution, window mode set to full screen. Just use the medium preset. Motion plus 10 set to nil. Start the game. There's Jin. Here we are getting 80 FPS. GPU load is around 60 to 65%. Perfect scenario for enabling. LSFG. Golden Forest. Enabled LSFG. Resume the game. Not observing a big improvement in performance, but yeah, camera animation is smoother now with LSFG on. I'm observing some ghosting around Jane's character model when I move the camera in complete circles. Minor graphical artifacts. Base FPS dropped down to around 65. GPU load increased to around 93%. Let's call my horse. Show you some combat. Initiated the standoff. Hold the Y key. Release it right before ending attack plan. Use the kunai to stagger the big guy. Another one. Hit the archer. Interface is not flickering. You can use LSFG in this game. Personally, I would recommend using FSR 3 frame generation. I'm testing the next game. Marvel Spiderman Remastered. This game supports DLSS frame generation, but it does not support FSR frame generation. Display mode set to full screen, full HD resolution using DLSS upscaler, quality preset. VSync disable, medium preset, motion blur 10 set to nil. There's Spiderman, here we're getting 80 FPS. GPU load is around 40% only. LSFG should be producing good results in this game. Very smooth experience. Swing around the city. Still getting 80 FPS. It's a crowded area. Perfect for testing. Absolutely stunning visuals. Enable LSFG. It's working. Wow, the game is running so smoothly. Camera is floating. We are getting around 238 FPS. Okay, I am observing some flickering around Spidey's head. So minor graphical artifacts in this game. The LSFG enabled. His head is flickering. Happens when I move the camera in complete circles. Head does not flicker when I move the camera at normal speeds like this. Definitely use LSFG. And Spiderman. Swing around. smooth animation. Base FPS is still around 80, GPU load is around 90%. So on powerful GPUs should be able to maintain a steady 80 FPS even with LSFG enabled. RTX 40 series GPUs, even the high-end RTX 30 series GPUs. I'll be testing the next game. Running Witcher 3 Wild Hunt next gen. I'll use the high preset, ray tracing disabled, DLSS upscaler set to quality. Quickly scroll down. Motion blur disabled. Display settings, borderless window mode, full HD resolution. Maximum frame rate set to unlimited. This is the Crookback box. There is Carol. Here we are getting around 80 FPS. Very high sensitivity for the camera. We'll be fighting against some drowners. I'll just enable LSFG. Press its hotkey. It's working. Back to the game. Yeah, I can observe the added amount of smoothness. Not observing any graphical artifacts. That's really good to see. HUD is not flickering. LSFG works very nicely in Witcher 3. I'll show you some combat. The base frame rate is around 66 to 70. Here we are hitting the GPU bottleneck. There's the creature. Use the wrong ability. Wanted to use Igni. Didn't select it. My bad. Now I'll be testing the next game. Elden Ring. This game's FPS is capped at 60. Let's see how LSFG works with it. Game settings. Borderless window display mode. Full HD resolution. Ray tracing disable. High preset. I'll just disable motion blur. Yeah, there's a character. Currently I'm standing at Gateway Ruins. There's a camp in front of me. You can see the bandits roaming around. Getting 60 FPS. I tested the older versions of LSFG in this game. Observed a lot of garbled textures. Let's see these textures have been fixed or not. LSFG is working. Resume the game. You can definitely observe the added amount of smoothness. FPS with frame generation on 180. Wow. Way better than the real 60 FPS. GPU load increase. It's around 94%. Not observed, beg your pardon, not observing the garbled textures around the left and right edges of the display. Few hitches here related to the game. Good results in Elden Ring. Way better than the previous versions of LSFG. FPS with frame generation does not feel as good as the real 170 FPS. Still it's way better than the real 60 FPS. I'll be testing the next game. Last title, Horizon Forbidden West. It's very demanding on the GPU. Settings, full HD resolution, display mode set to full screen, DLSS upscaler enabled, quality preset, basing disabled. Using the low preset, motion blur then set to nil. There's Aloy. I'll be fighting against bristlebacks in the quarry side. FPS is around 80. It's the same thing for the GPU load. Game looks stunning even using the low preset, as you can see. I'll just enable LSFG now. It's working. Base FPS dropped down to around 60. Can observe the added amount of smoothness. The camera is floating. I'm also observing some minor graphical artifacts. LS head is flickering. It seems the game's interface is also flickering. Not easy to observe this. happens when I move the camera in complete circles. Should be observing less graphical artifacts with a higher base frame rate. You can play the game this way as well. Just engage in combat. Base FPS is staying around 60. Trying to shoot the green canister. Do some elemental damage. Oh my god. Charged towards me. I did a lot of damage. Those are responsive. Good results in Horizon. Time to conclude the video. I observed performance gains in all of the games that I tested using LSFG. Some games felt smoother than the others. X3 frame generation mode tried to triple the FPS. Just make sure you have some GPU headroom before enabling it, as it will increase the GPU load. Input delay was not an issue. However, in a few games there were some minor graphical artifacts even when the base frame rate was around 60. So I hope the developer will be able to reduce these graphical artifacts with the future updates. Even in its current state, LSFG X3 frame generation mode is ready to use. You will definitely be impressed by its results, especially when the base frame rate is around 60. So that's it for the video guys. I hope you found it useful. Thanks for watching and have a nice day.